Tony Grossi picked the wrong quarterback to come for. 1 minute, he's going on a Cleveland radio show trying to paint Shedeur Sanders as some flashy, overconfident kid riding the wave of his dad's fame, and the next, he's tying himself in knots, accidentally admitting that the Browns' offense is a disaster and maybe Shedeur is justified in thinking he could do better. It's the kind of meltdown you almost have to rewind just to double-check he really said all that out loud. This wasn't just a bad take. It was an implosion wrapped in contradiction and sprinkled with media bias. Grossi was clearly trying to land a jab at Shedeur, accusing him of being too into his own hype, doing interviews, and acting like a star.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But here's the kicker. The interview in question? He didn't even ask for it. The media approached him. He answered professionally. And somehow, that turned into a narrative that he's arrogant and delusional. It's the kind of logic leap that only makes sense if you're more committed to the story than the facts. And then came the most unintentionally hilarious part. Grossi casually admitted that the Browns' offense is terrible. Like actually said, out loud, that they're struggling to move the ball and haven't scored a touchdown in weeks. So wait, let's get this straight. A young, productive college quarterback thinks he could help a team that can't score, and that's cocky? That's the controversy? The mental gymnastics are wild. This is where the whole thing just falls apart. Because Grossi's comments accidentally proved Sanders' point. The Browns do need help. And Shedeur's confidence isn't some act. It's earned. He's shown poise, leadership, and production at Colorado. He protects the ball, avoids turnovers, and plays smart. And while Grossi fixated on sacks, ignoring context, offensive line play, and game situations, he completely missed what actually matters in a quarterback: decision-making, composure, and performance under pressure. This whole mess wasn't really about football, it was about perception. Because let's be honest, when players like Jackson Dart or Caleb Williams show swagger, it's cool. It's star quality. But when Shedeur does it, suddenly it's a problem. The double standard isn't just obvious, it's exhausting. And instead of asking real questions about talent or fit, media guys like Grossi default to tired narratives and surface-level critiques. At the end of the day, this wasn't a takedown of Shedeur Sanders. It was an unintentional case study in how badly the media can fumble the ball when they chase clicks over context. Sanders didn't even have to respond. The contradiction spoke for itself. And Tony Grossi? Well, he handed over the mic, and Shedeur didn't even have to say a word to win the argument. Tony Grossi walked straight into a media trap of his own making and pulled the pin himself. What started as a typical Cleveland radio rant quickly morphed into a self-owned so transparent, it practically wrote its own headlines. He set out to criticize Shedeur Sanders for what he called attention-seeking, and ended up proving Sanders' entire point, contradicting himself in real time, and exposing just how lazy and biased sports commentary can get. Let's start with the moment that sparked the fire. Shedeur Sanders, a highly touted college quarterback with NFL buzz behind his name, was asked by the media how he felt about the current state of the Cleveland Browns offense. In a calm, confident tone, he suggested that he could bring value to the team. That's it. No bragging. No trash talk. Just self-belief, something you'd expect from a quarterback aiming to make it at the highest level. But Grossi took that and ran straight into absurd territory. He went on air and accused Sanders of being too confident, too flashy, too presumptuous. The usual tired complaints lobbed at young players who dare to speak with conviction. Except this time, the argument didn't land. It actually collapsed in on itself. Because Grossi himself acknowledged that the Browns' offense is, in his words, awful. His words, not paraphrased, not misquoted. That was his own assessment of the very team he was defending. So how does it make sense to criticize a young quarterback for expressing interest in helping an offense you just called awful? It doesn't. That's the point. The entire critique lacked logic from the beginning. Instead of evaluating Shedeur Sanders based on tape, stats, or mechanics, Grossi's rant focused entirely on optics. On tone. On personality. It wasn't a breakdown of decision-making or pocket presence. It was a complaint about how Sanders sounded in a press clip. That's not football analysis. That's emotional projection wrapped in commentary. And this is where the double standard rears its head. Shedur's confidence, demonstrated through composed interviews and a stellar college resume, is treated as a problem. Meanwhile, other quarterbacks with similar swagger, like Jackson Dart or Caleb Williams, are framed as alpha competitors. The praise flows freely when confidence fits the narrative. But when Sanders speaks with the same energy, suddenly it's arrogance. Suddenly it's attention-seeking. This isn't subtle. This isn't new. And frankly, it's exhausting. The NFL quarterback position requires confidence. You cannot play that role at a high level without it. From the moment you step into a huddle, you're expected to command attention, project calm, and exude belief, not just in yourself, but in every play you're about to lead. That's not ego. That's part of the job description. So when Sanders, who's already shown he can deliver under pressure, responds to media questions with poise and composure, why is that suddenly a red flag? The answer lies in the media's obsession with narrative. The moment Sanders gave a quote that could be spun into controversy, it was game on. And GROSSI bit down hard. But here's the twist. His commentary ended up undermining itself. By acknowledging that the Browns' offense was ineffective, he inadvertently justified Sanders' perspective. He walked the audience through a self-contradiction in real time, almost like he didn't realize he was proving the opposite point. That's the kind of contradiction you can't unhear. And the worst part? GROSSI didn't bring football fundamentals into the conversation at all. His criticism wasn't rooted in Sanders' reads, ball placement, or pocket awareness. He focused on sacks taken during a preseason game, ignoring the fact that Sanders wasn't turning the ball over. He wasn't panicking. He was protecting possessions. In the NFL, avoiding turnovers is more important than taking a sack. A sack loses yards. A pick loses games. Sanders played smart football, and instead of acknowledging that, GROSSI boiled it down to a few hits behind the line. That's shallow analysis, and it misses the bigger picture. Let's go even deeper. This wasn't even a media takedown rooted in performance. It was a personality critique. And that's where the bias really shows. The criticism of Sanders wasn't about football, it was about how he carries himself. That's not scouting. That's signaling. And here's the thing. If Sanders had played up humility, the media would have spun it the other way. Does Shedur lack killer instinct? Is he unsure of himself at the next level? The outcome was already scripted. No matter what he said, the narrative would have been shaped to generate clicks. That's what GROSSI did. He didn't expose Sanders. He exposed the media's playbook. Let's be clear, Sanders didn't seek out the spotlight for this moment. He was approached by the media. He answered questions. The media framed those answers as if they revealed some deep flaw in his character. But what they really revealed was a refusal to evaluate him fairly. Meanwhile, Sanders has the receipts. College production? Proven. Leadership? Documented. Professional demeanor? Consistent. And he's backed by coaches and players who have seen his work ethic firsthand. So why are we still acting surprised when he speaks with confidence? GROSSI's critique was rooted in outdated thinking. The belief that players should wait their turn to be confident. That swagger is earned only after media figures say it's okay. But that doesn't hold up anymore, especially when the metrics, the tape, and the reputation already speak for the player. This isn't about defending Sanders because of potential. It's about defending logic. The media's job is to analyze, not project. But what we got from GROSSI was projection all the way down. His frustration with the Browns' offensive disaster somehow turned into a rant against a quarterback who hasn't even taken a snap for the team. It's like blaming the fire department for smoke while you're still holding the match. Let's talk about the fallout. Because whether GROSSI wants to admit it or not, his comments backfired. The clip circulated. Fans called out the contradiction. Analysts weighed in. And the overwhelming response wasn't, "Wow, Shedur needs to tone it down." It was, "What is GROSSI even talking about?" That tells you everything. Shedur didn't have to respond. He didn't have to call out the hypocrisy. He let the facts handle it, and they did. The footage, the stats, and the calm professionalism all spoke louder than any radio segment ever could. In the end, this wasn't a football critique. It was a media meltdown. And Sanders? He walked away untouchable. Not because of PR spin, but because nothing in Grossi's rant stuck. The narrative fell apart before it even finished forming. So let's close it out with this. If media veterans want to remain credible, they need to do more than chase soundbites. They need to do their homework. They need to check their bias at the door. Because Shedeur Sanders doesn't need to prove anything to Tony Grossi. He's already proven it on the field, in the locker room, and under the spotlight. And when the time comes for him to step onto an NFL field, he won't be carrying media narratives with him. He'll be carrying the ball, and most likely, a chip on his shoulder from moments like this. What do you think? Was Grossi out of line, or just outdated? Are media narratives holding young players back, or are they just noise? Let's talk in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns that cut through the spin, hit that subscribe button. This is where sports talk gets real. No fluff, no filters, just the facts and the fallout. Let's call it what it is, a complete disconnect between media gatekeepers and the modern athlete. Tony Grossi wasn't just criticizing Shedeur Sanders. He was standing at the edge of a shifting landscape, yelling into the wind, trying to assert control over a narrative that had already left the station. What Grossi, and others like him, don't seem to grasp is that the era of controlling player personas through curated media soundbites is over. Players have the platform now. They've got the fan base, the footage, and the facts. And the facts? They were never on Grossi's side. Take a step back and look at what actually happened. Grossi made an emotional argument, not a football one. There was no breakdown of reads, no discussion about mechanics, pocket presence, pre-snap awareness, or progression timing. Just vibes and feelings about how Shedeur Sanders talked. Not how he played, how he talked. He boiled a rising NFL prospect down to a personality judgment. No real tape, no metrics, no context. Just personal irritation dressed up as sports critique. And somehow, in that same breath, he managed to acknowledge that the Browns' offense has been a disaster. So Sanders, a quarterback who's shown poise, success, and leadership, says he believes he could help. That's not delusion. That's reality. Let's not sugarcoat it. The Browns' quarterback situation has been a revolving door for over a decade. The offense is stuck. The scoring is inconsistent. The team's biggest Achilles heel has always been quarterback play. So for Shedeur Sanders to say he thinks he could compete? That's not arrogance. That's a fair assessment. What's wild is that Grossi was halfway there. He knows the Browns need help. He knows their current QB room isn't producing. But instead of engaging with that reality, he turned on the guy who dared to say the quiet part out loud. That's the kind of commentary that belongs in a time capsule, right next to rotary phones and dial-up internet. What makes this even more frustrating is that Shedeur didn't initiate the controversy. He was asked questions, gave honest answers, and moved on. There was no press stunt, no cocky video, no social media drama, just a confident player responding to the media. And that became the headline. The media asked for the quote, and then used it against him. That's the trap. And Grossi walked right into it. Instead of challenging the narrative, he embraced it. Instead of offering insight, he offered judgment. And instead of analyzing Shedeur's actual potential, based on his stats, his tape, his demeanor, he turned the spotlight on a soundbite and tried to make it mean more than it did. But the problem is, the people watching? They're smarter than that. They're paying attention. They've seen Shedeur Sanders in action. They know when someone's being unfairly targeted, and they can spot when a take isn't grounded in reality. This wasn't sports journalism. It was a public display of bias. And not the team versus team kind. The personal kind. The kind that shapes how athletes are portrayed. The kind that decides who's allowed to be confident and who's told to know their place. And that's where this thing hits a nerve. Because if Shedeur Sanders was named something else, if he wasn't black, if he wasn't Deion Sanders' son, if he didn't carry that blend of swag and professionalism, would this even be a conversation? Would a white quarterback from a blue blood program saying the exact same thing have sparked outrage? Or would it have been framed as competitive spirit and NFL-ready poise? We know the answer. Everyone does. That's why the blowback on Grossi's comments wasn't just swift, it was loud. Because this wasn't just about Shedeur. It was about every young athlete who's ever had to defend their confidence against an outdated standard of media-approved humility. And let's not pretend like this was Grossi's first controversial moment. He's had a track record of hot takes and misfires. But this time, the misfire hit something much bigger: the public's growing intolerance for lazy narratives and coded criticism. The days of sports media defining leadership through a narrow lens are ending. Athletes like Sanders are breaking the mold, not just through play, but through presence. They know how to talk to the media without groveling. They know how to believe in themselves without apologizing for it. And when that doesn't align with someone like Grossi's comfort zone, suddenly it's a problem. The irony is, NFL scouts want that confidence. They're looking for QBs who can walk into a hostile locker room, command the huddle, and lead men twice their age. The intangible it factor? That's what Shedeur was showing. And the media tried to make that a liability. Grossi missed the assignment entirely. He tried to make Sanders' composure seem performative, when really, it's what separates elite QBs from the rest. The real issue wasn't what Sanders said. It was that he said it with zero hesitation. With the kind of calm conviction that doesn't ask for approval. And that, for some people, is threatening. But let's flip this for a second. Let's talk about how Grossi's entire critique actually ended up validating Sanders. Because by admitting that the Browns' offense is terrible, he set the stage for why someone like Shedeur would be confident. That confidence wasn't baseless. It was backed by film, by success, by a deeper understanding of what he brings to the table. So the more Grossi talked, the more he made the case for Shedeur, not against him. That's why the internet didn't let this slide. People aren't just defending Shedeur because they like him. They're defending him because this moment exposed how media figures manipulate narratives to serve whatever emotional response they're having that day. This wasn't football talk. This was ego. This was frustration disguised as analysis. And it showed just how quickly credibility can erode when personal bias takes the wheel. And let's give Shedeur credit here. He didn't take the bait. He didn't hop on social media to fire back. He didn't drop a snarky post or stir more drama. He kept it moving. Because when you know your value, you don't need to debate it with people who clearly weren't paying attention in the first place. The restraint? That was leadership. That was maturity. That was the kind of moment that tells NFL teams, yeah, this guy gets it. Meanwhile, Grossi? He gave us a live demonstration of how not to cover an athlete. He reminded everyone why sports media needs a refresh. Because if your take starts and ends with personal discomfort over confidence, you're not analyzing the game. You're projecting onto it. And projecting isn't journalism. What we're seeing here is a shift, and Tony Grossi just got caught on the wrong side of it. The new generation of players isn't asking for permission to believe in themselves. They're not shrinking to fit into some outdated mold of likable. They're here to play, to lead, and to own their stories. Shedeur Sanders never raised his voice. He didn't get defensive. He let the media implode around their own contradictions. And in doing so, he won the argument Grossi didn't realize he was losing. Now the question is, what's next? Because this wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror. For sports media. For fans. For everyone who's still holding on to the belief that swagger is something to be punished instead of understood. Tony Grossi won't be the last media figure to make this mistake. But this moment should be a wake-up call. If you're not watching the game with objectivity, if you're not analyzing players for who they are, not who you think they should be, you're not covering sports. You're scripting a drama. And badly. Shedeur Sanders doesn't need to prove anything to a mic. He'll do it on the field. And when he does, people will remember this moment. Not because of what he said, but because of what was said about him. Shedeur didn't do anything wrong. He didn't step out of line. He answered a question with confidence, the way any quarterback with serious aspirations should. And instead of recognizing that for what it was, standard QB energy, Grossi chose to spin it into a controversy. But it didn't stick. Because the moment the rant aired, people saw it for what it was, a media veteran grasping at relevance by punching down on a young player who didn't deserve it. What's wild is how predictable it's become. The cycle goes like this. Athlete speaks with confidence, media twists it into arrogance, outrage ensues, take gets roasted, athlete comes out looking more composed than the person trying to critique them. It happens all the time. But this time, the hypocrisy was so blatant, it couldn't be ignored. Grossi literally said the Browns' offense is awful. That's not a critique, it's an indictment. And yet, when Sanders, who was asked about the team, offered a measured, confident answer, he got dragged for it. The contradiction isn't subtle. It's not even disguised. It's just bad journalism. And the fact that Sanders didn't flinch? That says everything. He didn't need to clap back. He didn't log on and post a reaction video. He let the sports world dissect Grossi's argument on its own, and the consensus was brutal. Even fans of the Browns, even people with no horse in the race, could see through the nonsense. Because at the end of the day, football isn't about who can play humble for the camera. It's about who can deliver. And Shedeur has done nothing but deliver. He's shown poise under pressure. He's protected the ball. He's led teams and answered tough questions without folding. That's what you want in a quarterback. That's the resume. Meanwhile, what does Grossi bring to the table? A stale framework that penalizes confidence when it doesn't look the way he thinks it should. That's not analysis. That's ego. This whole incident isn't just about Grossi either. It's about accountability in sports commentary. It's about holding media figures responsible when they push narratives based on feeling, not fact. Because if Shedeur Sanders wasn't already proving himself, there wouldn't be this much effort to drag him down. And in trying to tear him down, Grossi ended up doing the opposite. He validated Shedeur's presence. He reminded everyone why confidence matters. And he handed the spotlight to a player who knows exactly how to handle it. So what's your verdict? Was this just a media misfire, or is it part of a bigger issue with how we talk about young, confident players? Drop a comment and tell us what you think. And if you're tired of outdated hot takes and double standards, you already know. Subscribe for more breakdowns where the facts always come first.